Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of the Legal Beagle podcast. Today will be a Senate Judiciary update, as Brandon and I have been backed up with a lot of legal work for the last 2 weeks, unable to do our continuing education series. Hopefully next Thursday we'll be back doing that. But today we'll be highlighting a couple judicial activists heading toward the bench thanks to our Senate majority of Democrats in Washington. I believe one of them's from Washington State, so coming at you, Saroff. I know you're getting excited, but y'all just take a look at what's going on here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ritz, I will tell you, I have been so disappointed as things have come through. Senator Haggerty and I gave you the benefit of the doubt for the U.S. Attorney, but we have heard from so many people in West Tennessee of their frustration with you. So when you look at this, how can criminal defendants that come before you as a judge think you're going to give them a fair shake? How can attorneys that expect their clients to be treated fairly in the courtroom expect that you're going to behave ethically and not discredit them, not discredit the attorneys?
Senator, in my career, 19 years, the only job I've had as a lawyer is to represent the interests of the United States and keep people safe in our state.
How about the people of Tennessee?
And we represent the people.
Because that should be a priority too. You referenced the previous allegation against you. The court never addressed that because the attorney withdrew from the case. Okay, let me ask you this. You hired a number 2, Reagan Taylor Fondren, who received a year of probation for prosecutorial misconduct, including unconstitutionally burying evidence and misleading the court. Why did you hire her, and what was the follow-on with that?
Senator, our first assistant United States attorney, I did not hire Ms. Fondren. She has been a dedicated public servant her whole career. I promoted her to be first assistant. As with all of my AUSAs, I am proud of the work that they do to uphold the rule of law and protect people.
Let's talk about the people of West Tennessee, because your primary duty as a U.S. attorney is to keep the people of West Tennessee safe. Memphis is more dangerous under your leadership, and it's a direct result of your lax policies of not prosecuting violent crime. We know about the Lobley case, and we know that he had been charged with 4 felonies, including unlawful possession. So the Shelby County DA has publicly stated that the Lobley case was accepted for federal prosecution. Is that accurate?
Senator?
Yes or no?
9 days before the tragic killing of Officer McKinney, our office did accept that for potential federal prosecution.
Okay.
We were diligently investigating that case.
Let's talk about this. The prior U.S. attorney brought 100% of prosecutable gun cases. If you weren't in charge, Mr. Lobley would have been behind bars.
I want to say, Senator, if I may, I have no control over the state system. Mr. Lobley had been arrested in the state system and released on bond in the state.
Federal charges.
He was arrested.
Federal charges. You and the DA have a difference of opinion on this, because he says he was accepted for federal prosecution.
And referenced for our consideration, but we had not yet charged Mr. Lobley, Senator.
Okay, so you were not moving at the pace of your predecessor. Let me move on to sex offenders, because in May of last year you stated, and I quote, "Most convicted sex offenders who live and work in West Tennessee are productive members of the community." What would you say to the families whose children's lives have been ruined by sexual exploitation and abuse? And how do you think that they feel knowing that the chief law enforcement officer, their chief federal law enforcement officer, believes that these sex abusers are productive members of the community?
Senator, I don't believe I said that.
I'll
there may
provide
be,
you with the quote.
I'd be happy to respond in writing,
Yes.
but I can tell you, Senator, we have an
You
active...
made that quote. Let me move on, because if you'll respond in writing, I wanted to raise the issue we talked about previously, which is you removed the Tennessee flag from the U.S. Attorney's Office after you were sworn in. And we have heard from several people that you did this. So I want to know, you told me it was because you thought the office was cluttered that you removed the flag. But you were there for the people of West Tennessee. You removed the Tennessee flag. So what did you do with it? Did you throw it in the trash? Did you put it in the closet? Why did you not see your appointment as having a duty to the people of West Tennessee?
As Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer, Senator, I represent the United States and the Department of Justice. And we're talking about the conference room where we give press conferences and similar public statements. And I felt it was fundamentally...
Mr. Ritz, that doesn't fly. Mr. Chairman, I've got the sex abuse quote. I'll submit it for the record. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ritz, you are a political activist, aren't you?
I would not consider myself that at all, Senator.
Okay. When you were sworn in as U.S. Attorney, you gave a speech, didn't you?
I did.
Okay. Here's what you said. I want to quote from your speech. But you should know that justice for me is about more than putting people in prison. For me, it's also about who votes and how hard it is to cast that vote. It's about where pipelines go. It's about where bus routes go. Justice is about whether people in all zip codes can get along, whether women have access to health care, whether citizens have affordable housing or clean drinking water. Sometimes those are Department of Justice issues. Sometimes they are not. But for me, they're all justice issues. Did I read that accurately?
I believe so, Senator.
Okay. Did you really remove the Tennessee state flag from your conference room?
Senator, I appreciate you asking about this again. As the Chief Federal Law Enforcement...
Welcome. Did you do it?
So I felt it was fundamentally inappropriate when I gave press conferences and similar statements to the public to indicate or suggest somehow that I spoke for the state, which I don't under our system of federalism.
Are you embarrassed to be from Tennessee?
Not at all, Senator. I am from Tennessee, grew up as a public school kid in Tennessee.
But you were embarrassed to have the Tennessee flag.
That's not it at all, Senator.
Okay. You have a history of lying to your professional colleagues, don't you?
That's not true, Senator.
Okay. Do you know a former public defender named Stephen Shankman?
I knew him to a degree. I'm not sure we ever had any cases together. I knew who he was, yes.
Well, in a private email, not meant for public consumption, to another one of your professional colleagues, this is what Mr. Shankman said, talking about your lying. He said, "It is unfortunate that this is not the first, second, third, or whatever occasion that this sort of thing has occurred. But everyone should be aware of this unfortunate pattern of behavior. You should be aware," he said to the other lawyer, before the other lawyer dealt with you. "Your client should be aware, and you should proceed with extreme caution." Was Mr. Shankman lying?
To the degree he suggested that I acted unethically, that was not accurate, and it wasn't in any occasion, much less on numerous occasions.
Okay, let's talk about this case, United States v. Von Rico Weber, which you claim to not remember. But before I do that, a few seconds ago, you lied to Senator Hawley, didn't you?
I'm under oath, Senator. I did not lie.
You said you have no knowledge of any complaint, professional complaint made against you, didn't you?
I said I have no knowledge of any sort of formal complaint, and he read from a letter that I don't believe I ever saw.
And you were shocked. You never heard of that before.
If there were a formal complaint, that, as I said, I had not known about that.
Okay. You were amazed.
I don't recall any of that.
Any?
I recall this Mr. Weber's
You have
case.
amnesia about it.
Again, I am unaware of any formal complaint or investigation. Certainly was not,
You believe in the Tooth Fairy?
Senator, I don't,
You believe in the Easter Bunny? Now, in this case, United States v. Von Rico Weber, you lied to the defense counsel. And the defense counsel then had to go before the court and withdraw a plea for his counsel. And a complaint was filed, about which you apparently have amnesia. And the Justice Department replaced you. And the lawyer from the Justice Department who replaced you, this is what the lawyer said. The new attorney said about you. Said these allegations against Mr. Ritz are, quote, serious. And it is taken so seriously, referring to the Department of Justice, by our office. That is one of the reasons I'm here, and Mr. Ritz will be more than likely be taken off this case because of those allegations. End quote. You lied to Senator Hawley, didn't you?
I didn't lie to the defense counsel in that case. I didn't lie today, Senator.
Now, my good friend Senator Ossoff asked you if you'd follow the law. And you said, yeah. But if you're lying to us today, we're stuck with you, aren't we?
Senator, I have not lied and did not lie in that case.
You just have amnesia.
I did not lie in that case. There was a written plea agreement with the entire agreement of the parties.
If you believe that, you believe Elvis is alive and running a small bait stand on Lake Erie. Shame on you.
Mr. Ritz,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Ritz, for standing for this nomination and for being here today. Now, it's my understanding that you were subject to an ethics investigation by OPR. Is that right?
Never in my career.
Never. But you're aware of the situation in United States versus Von Rico Weber, where you were accused of making these material representations to a defendant's attorney in order to elicit a guilty plea.
I have some recollection of that, Senator, but I was not subject to any sort of formal complaint or investigation.
Okay. Well, it's my understanding that in this circumstance, this would have resulted in the defendant serving a 10-year prison sentence, and the accusation is that you led the defendant to believe that a low sentence, a much lower sentence, would be in order, or perhaps even probation. I just want to read to you the letter, the email that we received from the concerned defense attorney, shining light on the incident. The person writing this email is recounting a conversation with the defense attorney in which you allegedly misled the defense attorney and the defendant. After the defense attorney explains it, here's how he explains it. At this point, I stopped the conversation and said, was the AUSA Kevin Ritz? The answer was yes. It is unfortunate that this is not the first, second, third, or whatever occasion that this sort of thing has occurred, but everyone should be aware of this unfortunate pattern of behavior. You should be aware, your clients should be aware, and you should proceed with extreme caution. It is a sad commentary. This is a concerning allegation, of course. Now, I assume that you would agree, certainly, that misleading a criminal defense counsel as to the nature of the charges against the defendant and the likely sentence that might result from a guilty plea that would violate a federal prosecutor's ethical responsibilities.
Yes, and I did not do that in that case, Senator.
Now, my understanding is that a complaint was made against you with the Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility and that an investigation ensued. At what point did you become aware of that investigation?
Again, Senator, to my knowledge, there was never an OPR investigation or a complaint for that matter.
Okay, so you're not aware of anything like that?
That's correct.
Does the information you just heard, the accusation, does that reflect your pattern of behavior as a prosecutor?
Absolutely not. And I recall this, and I recall that the person who had sent that email communication certainly had not communicated with me. I'm not actually sure we had ever had cases together in the first place. In any event, I took action, and I believe I communicated with everyone who received that, because in our federal district, it's really important for AUSAs and defense attorneys to be able to trust each other. And I took my reputation very seriously.
Okay, but you would agree that if you had done those things, if that had resulted in a complaint to OPR and you didn't disclose it, either of those things would be a problem?
If I had acted unethically, absolutely, but I did not.
Now, as you know, one of the most important decisions a U.S. attorney can make is the decision about whom to hire as a first assistant U.S. attorney. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
It's a pretty important thing. And it's why I find it disturbing that you chose to hire Ms. Reagan Taylor Fondren to serve as your first assistant, despite the 2 disciplinary investigations that she was under for serious accusations relating to ethics violations. As a former federal prosecutor myself, I know that the fairness of the justice system depends a lot on, among other things, how prosecutors handle things like exculpatory evidence. And withholding exculpatory evidence from defense is a big problem. Ever since Brady versus Maryland was decided in 1963, every prosecutor knows that there is an obligation to disclose these things. Now, when you chose Ms. Taylor Fondren to be your first assistant, were you aware of the 2 ongoing investigations of her alleged prosecutorial misconduct related to failure to disclose exculpatory evidence?
I may have been aware of ongoing proceedings. My recollection, Senator, they were not. They were still proceeding, and I honestly can't remember if they still are today.
So they were pending at the time you chose her. Were you not concerned about that?
Senator, I am not sure I knew the particulars of the situation.
In fact, she began your service as a first assistant before her court-ordered suspension from legal practice was enforced. Is that right?
I believe that's correct, Senator. I'm not actually entirely sure.
Now, a man served 4 additional years in prison because of the misconduct of your first assistant. Now, thankfully, the Court of Appeals corrected her error, but not for the full 4 years. And so, was it in spite of or because of Ms. Taylor Fondren's willingness to violate the defendant's constitutional rights that you chose her to be your first assistant?
Senator, as I said before, I believe that Ms. Fondren and all of our AUSAs are doing an excellent job keeping people safe in West Tennessee. These allegations and this incident occurred, I want to make clear, before Ms. Fondren was part of our office several years ago.
But you were aware of the accusations?
I was aware in a very vague sense.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all 3 of you. Judge Pinnell, you are a political activist, aren't you?
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. I am a judge on the Washington State Court of Appeals. I don't consider that to be a political activist.
Okay. In 2020, you and 10 of your friends issued a written statement. You entitled it, quote, Statement on Racism, White Supremacy, and Justice. Here's what you said. I'm quoting from you now. Racism and white supremacy currently plague every social, educational, economic, governmental, and legal system. Racism and white supremacy currently plague every social, educational, economic, governmental, and legal system in our state and in our nation. And they have for centuries. Both You're referring to your state and America. Both target black, indigenous, African American, Latinx, and other people and communities of color, resulting in entrenched inequality and inequity, manifesting in unjust, unfair, and differential treatment, and yielding remarkably disparate and negative outcomes relative to those experienced by white people. End quote. Did I read that accurately?
Senator, I don't have it in front of me. I don't have any reason to think that you did not read that correctly.
Okay. You are very active in Planned Parenthood, are you not?
No, Senator.
Okay. Well, Planned Parenthood, in its annual reports, lists you as a, quote, silver friend, close quote. Do you know what a silver friend means?
I don't, Senator.
That's someone who has donated between $1,000 and $2,500 to Planned Parenthood of Greater Washington and North Idaho. That's in the Planned Parenthood annual reports. You don't know anything about that?
I don't recall. What I recall, Senator, is that my husband had donated to Planned Parenthood, and I think at some point in time they listed me along with him, but I believe that was a donation.
This is you.
Okay.
And in fact, they say that as of 2018, you've been a donor for at least 10 consecutive years. Is that right?
I do not recall donating them for the last 10 consecutive, 10 years before 2018 or 10?
That's as of?
I don't recall, Senator.
Okay, you don't remember. Okay, let me ask you, you're on the Court of Appeal, let me ask you about a few of your cases. Do you remember a case called State v. Westwood?
I believe so, Senator.
And you were reversed in that case, weren't you?
Senator, in reviewing my cases, I think I've been reversed in about 2% of the cases that I've issued. I've issued almost...
Were you reversed in that case, though?
That was a very complicated case regarding sentencing law.
But I'm going to run out of time, and I got a bunch of these.
Okay.
Were you reversed?
That might have been one of the 2% of the cases. I think so.
reversed?
I believe that was one of the 2% of cases,
Do you remember
Senator.
a case called Personal Restraint of Heiress?
That, I think, was the case regarding whether or not the person had been
Were you
deprived.
reversed in that case?
That was, I think I was not
Were you
reversed.
reversed in that case, counsel?
Senator, I think that I wasn't reversed as to outcome, but it was one of the 2% of the cases where the state Supreme Court
Do you
disagreed with the
remember a
analysis.
case called Parental Rights of ALK? Were you reversed in that case?
Senator, I think that was one of the 2% of my over 450 cases where there was a reversal.
Do you remember a case called State v. Log Bomb?
I recall that case, Senator. That case.
Were you reversed in that case?
That was one of the 2% of cases. I issued an opinion to affirm a conviction, and the state Supreme Court overruled that and
Remember
reversed.
a case called State v. Barboza v. Cortez? Were you reversed in that case?
Senator, that case is not coming to mind. Again, I've issued over myself personally written over 450
You
decisions.
remember a case called State v. Telvik?
Senator, I think I recall that name. That might have been one of the 2% of
reversed
cases.
in that too?
That might have been one of the 2% of cases,
Okay.
Senator.
Another case, Hendrickson v. Moses Lake School. Were you reversed in that case?
Senator, I recall that case. I think that might have been one of the 2% of cases where the state Supreme Court disagreed with the analysis of another appellate
Were you
court. from the
reversed? You
state.
remember a case called State v. Curry? Were you reversed there?
Senator, I think you're reading off all the cases. I think that's one of the 2% of cases.
Okay. How about a case called Estate v. Rathbone? Were you reversed?
That's probably one of the 2%, Senator.
How about a case called Douglas v. Shamrock Paving Company?
Senator, that's
Reversed.
a case where I was largely affirmed. The only thing that was a reversed, I included everything, even if it was just a partial reverse. The only thing that I was reversed on was an award of attorney fees. The substance of the law, which was rather new in that case regarding what constituted an investigation for an environmental
So
cleanup.
you weren't reversed?
That part of it I was affirmed.
Yeah, I think that would be a surprise to the Supreme Court that you weren't reversed.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
I'm out of time. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, for
Senator.
your indulgence.
For the record, what is 2% of 450?
I think it's about 11 cases, if memory serves, 11 to 12 cases of the cases that I've written, many of which are grappling with really novel issues. And so that's what happens.
11 out of 450?
Over 450 that I've written myself.
Senators should be so lucky. Senator Booker?
I haven't been right 98